Yeah. Yes. So forget that. I'll just settle the next person. But yeah, please. Yeah.
I've got a question really, and it is this: you make references to African British
Yes.
and African American.
Yes.
But I just wondered whether you've got a perspective on people from the African continent, both men and women,
Yes.
In this country,
Yes.
engaging with all of the issues of racism and displacement, etc., that we've been talking about. And I say this for one reason. The Caribbean diaspora has been very much affected by Western spiritual beliefs and established churches and all that. Even though that whole movement towards Pentecostalism and so on is not rampant in Africa, on the continent itself, nevertheless, there's still that belief in ancestral worship, let's say, the role of deities and spirits in our lives. I am a traditional African priest, for example, and the issues around psychology mixed with religion and what that does to people when they are asked to lock down that bit of themselves, see it as not legitimate, or to be avoided or feared, whereas that is really at the root of the very being. I mean, you can't call yourself an African if you don't believe in your ancestors.
That's right.
So I'm just wondering whether if you were to juxtapose those of us in the African diaspora who were in the Caribbean, and in addition to all the other stuff that the Europeans did, they tried to displace that African spirituality in us, and people who actually come from the continent and were never part.
Well, I think it's a really good point you mentioned, and it links with kind of like some of the theory that Robin wrote a paper a couple of years ago, talking about the double fracture of people who were from the Caribbean in terms of they had the enslavement plus colonisation, whereas on the continent of Africa they just had colonisation. So you've got a double fracture, and that's why when you look at
I think that the slavery, which will be part, sorry to
you did one.
but which is going to be part of my presentation. I think slavery impacted Africa as well.
Well, true. In terms of you lost your brothers and sisters. So there wasn't an impact, but there was a different type of impact in terms of what happened to the slaves when they were in the Caribbean. But just to come back to your point, in terms of when you've looked at the statistics in the education system of the children that are failing most, it's quite often the ones that are from Jamaica and the Caribbean. The ones from the continent of Africa are more intact. And Jamaica, for example, was one of the countries that produced the most had most slaves in terms of the number of slave plantations and such. So they're more fractured. And also a high proportion of people, like say, from Jamaica came to England. So again, they left a generation growing up without parents. So coming back to your point about... I'll touch on to you.
Can I just say... I just got very mindful of the time. I mean, it's an interesting conversation, and if we can sort of come back to it at the end. Well made, and it's great to mention that.
Is that okay if we come back to? I'm going to give
you later on at the end. Sorry. I'll just leave it mindful. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker, Chukwan. Sorry, I apologise about pronouncing your name incorrectly. So again, we're going to have about 15 minutes or so, and then sort of 5 minutes of questions. Is that okay?
Yes.
So we're going to move on to the next question.
Right, so my name is Chukwan. My presentation is actually going to touch a little bit on what you said, Erica, and the question Professor also mentioned earlier. I did my PhD at Birmingham University, finished in 2013. So my background is in performance arts and theatre. So my presentation will be a little bit artistic, which reflects my background. So I'm gonna start giving a background of my work, and then because I come from a Lusophone Portuguese experience, and then coming to Britain, it brings another different type of personality and identity. So I'm going to be talking about Angola history, its influence, my work, how my work emerged right in London, my artistic influences. I'm going to be talking about the African diaspora religion influence and how the Caribbean became a central point for the development of my performance work. And then I'm going to end with some of the pictures of the works that I've developed over the years, the artistic work, in order for me to reinvent the self in the British context. So I was born in Angola, and during the civil war in Angola, I grew up, during that turbulence of having, this social structure and having different political parties fighting to, first it was fighting against the Portuguese, and then after independence, the country went through a civil war of 26 years, which is, Angola has one of the longest civil war in Africa. I think it's Sudan, Congo, and then Angola. So my background, obviously, growing up in the middle of that turbulence, I was deeply affected. And they are the three leaders that after after independence, they were fighting, and there was a disagreement in terms of taking ownership of power and controlling the political structure in the country. So as a result of the war, as you can see, Angola has the highest number of people that are disabled of war because of the miners and all that. And then during the war, black people were treating black people very bad. The urbanization and architecture in the houses were affected because of the civil war. So, but because I grew up in Rwanda, in the capital, so I was also influences. I had also influence from carnival. The carnival is an important aspect of the country to celebrate the culture and identity. So being on that environment, I actually had the influence of indirectly, in order for me to create choreographic ways of performance and using the body. And also another ceremony, another important ritual ceremony that is big in the country is celebrating the sea and the goddess of the sea and how important is the sea in relation to the relation with the people in the country. So because of this ceremony of the sea is I see as one of the influence, as well as the ceremony of rituals of death and funerals. So all that structures of rituals became a way of influencing my work. But I never realized that until I arrived in London. So another important influence in my work. Because all I'm giving is I'm giving you a context first of theoretical background of understanding. Then when you see my work, you can make the connections. So the Chokwe culture of Angola is one of the is internal of the country, and for some reason it's one of the traditional culture that hasn't been really touched by the Portuguese colonial experience. So because of that, the Chokwe culture in the country is one of the strongest and influences a lot how people base their selves or ways of collective identity looking at the Chokwe. So the whole, when I started developing my performance in London, I looked at Chokwe mask and the whole aesthetic of creating ritual practice. And that was the basis of me starting to recreate an identity in the new context. And I think two important books that give a historical background of Angolan history for anyone who's interested to look into it. So when I arrived in London, I was a refugee. I came during the war, which reflecting what you said. My experience in England is, I would say, 20-25 years in the country, and arriving in England, I came from the Portuguese Lusophone perspective, without knowing the language, without having all the families in here already in place to kind of give me a guidance. So in a sense, I was lost. So and then I thought the best way for me to reconstruct myself and put myself in a position of power, and being in a country where I'm not inferior, it was to look back at African identity and ways of linking with the ritual practice and ways of adoring the body and dance and music as well. So that was the first performance I did in the studio. I did three performances, which was recorded, the photographic performance in the studio, where all I wanted was to, because before that I was looking at Nubia, because there was a book in the library, a big book on Nubia, so I kind of look at Nubia people in Sudan. So through that, and also looking at the chokwe, so I created a performance, and I had that background with textile material to link to give that physical material link with Africa. So, and because I wanted to create performances, but I was looking also references of other artists in the British context that created performance work. So Rotomi Fanikeo, the Nigerian artist who lived in London during the 80s, became a reference work for me to start making my work, because he was looking at the black male body, and also because he was exploring photography and using his fractured identity in Britain to connect with the Yoruba, Nigeria identity and iconography. And his work very much became the central point in terms of me developing my studio work. I also looked at Fela Kuti. What Fela Kuti, the works of Fela Kuti became influenced because of the fact that he, the dancers in his group, they paint themselves, and also he is one of the artists who actually made ritual practice during in his shrines. So ritual became also an artistic way of, apart from the music. But in Fela's work, what I looked into was more the ritual aspect. And brought Guillermo Gomez Pena and Coco Fusco, which Coco Fusco is from Cuba, Cuban American. Guillermo is Mexican, and they both live in America. And they are performance artists as well. And they create this performance of cage work that challenged the whole Western hegemony and the whole idea of discovery of America. So they travel all over the world through this performance, and the whole idea was to challenge the whole Cristobal Colombo discovery of America. So their work and the reverse anthropology that they did while in the cage became also a reference point in my work. And also, because I came from, being an Angolan and in London, I always found interesting to also connect with the Caribbean. And as part of my work, the Caribbean, especially Jamaica and Haiti, are countries that use rituals, and they're very much strong ritual aspect, and through that their ritual work is also where I look in terms of creating my work. The whole aesthetic, the whole aspect of using the crossroads and the whole linkage. And I'm aware, and then as I'm learning more, I'm aware that, as Professor said earlier, this whole fact of having the Baptist and Pentecostal references in the Caribbean, but still there is a strong African reference in their rituals. And also Brazil, Candomblé in Brazil also is a reference point, and also because the Portuguese connection, capoeira, some people say came from Angola, so that reference also I bring into my work. So now I'm going to just go through some of my work. So I mainly use body paint, and I perform in site-specific spaces. Sometimes I perform in gallery opens. So the whole idea is to making that connection through ritual practice and worshiping and connecting with Africa. But it's all artistic and symbolic, because I wasn't trained, or I don't have a direct, I would say, linkage. I have a linkage, but no one trained me, so it's all an artistic, symbolic creation to reinvent a new identity in a rich context. And the whole idea of using the crossroads and the nature, it becomes an important way of recreating my work. And this performance was actually at the Parliament Square next to Nelson Mandela statue. So I wanted to challenge that position of being in the position, in the place of power, and in the imperial place, and exploring and presenting an African identity to create a contrast. And as you can see, the Parliament Square is behind me, and I presented my identity in the imperial place. That was the holiday. This one was a performance I did at Appley Park Cemetery in London. And this cemetery actually has a strong connection with African people. And I've been told that this cemetery hold certain people that fight the slavery and colonialism in Britain. They were buried in this cemetery. So I did a symbolic work I did a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Which borough is this?
The purpose of this work.
No, which borough is that cemetery?
Oh, it's in Stoke-Newton.
Yes, I thought so.
Yeah, Stoke-Newton.
Upstairs Street.
Yeah. It's actually some part of the cemetery is in Church Street.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna make it sweet. I'm gonna end it here. But thank you very
much. First of all, that first speaker is very, very powerful, and it was interesting in terms of what you said about the land itself. Yeah, how your journey from Angola to the UK, but also what I found really interesting is about connectivity, about self. It was interesting sort of being at the front and everyone here was sort of very quiet, listening as if we were connected in some way to what we saw and what we were hearing. I thought that was really great. And why I mentioned that, because I was at a conference and we talked about hip hop. There are people who've never ever been to the continent of Africa. When you see some of the way that they're sort of the artistic sort of movements just replicate what's in Africa. That's the similar thing that I came to mind when I saw this. So I sort of thank you. So we've got any questions, please?
I just wanted to ask, you said that you weren't really trained in terms of to do these symbolic art. Yeah, and I feel like in terms of religion and stuff, I feel like feel like, and I'd love to do research on the African traditions that we had before slavery, which you're saying is still happening, but I feel like it's more like undercover, even within our own community, we internalize that this is nonsense and this is juju and this is bad. And I feel like it's so important because again, that's aspects of our identity. And just, I just my observations how it's accepted in Asia where they can have the Hinduism and the Buddhism, which is very similar to what we have in Africa. And so thank you for sharing.
Yeah, but I think, I personally think that one of the reasons is because there's this power in there. There's a lot of power in there. And I think I feel a lot like there's so much power there, but people are running away from. So, you know, the whole colonial experience actually created a big damage.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, I think one of the things we as African people have to get clear of, we talk of religion, but African spirituality shouldn't be put in the same context of religion. Religion and African spirit, two separate things, and we should keep it separate. And I'll say to you, we've been to Angola for a ritual. Yeah.
Which part?
What's the place there?
Where?
It's nearer to
Angola, Congo Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we went to where the kings were killed by the Portuguese. Yeah. Now, you might say you're not spiritual, but you're very spiritual, and you know the ancestors are talking through you, and they're giving you information to impart on people. And once you go on to the Caribbean, voodoo, and the connection with Africa, is that we've been so indoctrinated into Christianity and Islam that we fail to recognize. Until we go back to spirituality, our spirituality, we'll never be free.
Thank you very much for the comment.
It was only a very similar point. I was going to comment specifically on what you said about you're going to be trained.
No, I say I've never been trained in the sense that because I know some people they are dancers.
I understand what you mean.
And then they did in Africa when they were young. Okay. So more in that sense.
Yeah, but the point I want to make is that very similar to what Billy has just said. You are chosen by the spirit world to be a medium and instrument, so that what you're doing is a form of expression of what they want to express. So in that sense, they are training you to do what you do, and it helps to extend the tradition, so that even if you may not be confirmed as a priest, nevertheless, the ancestral world around you connect with your energy and you with them, and they're doing the training and using you as a medium for that expression.
Brother, the tradition is continued in you.